Sony right now is really pushing the pedal to the metal. They've decided they're either going big or going home for next gen. Now you may be asking yourself, why am I saying this? What's all the hype about? Well, for me at least, I thought Sony was going big right when I watched the PS5 reveal event. You know, the entire future of gaming event? And I was sold right there and then. I was like, you know what, Sony, you got me. Just go ahead, take all my money. But from what I've read about the statement made by Imran Khan, former editor at Game Informer who is now a host and contributor at Kinda Funny, I'm all that much more hyped for release knowing that, okay, alright, Sony really wants us future PS5 owners to get the full special treatment. Which, of course, we rightfully deserve, you know, being gamers and all who, as everyone knows, are top tier elite members of the human race. But let me just get into his statement real quick. He claims that, and keep in mind these are more or less his exact words taken from a post he made on ResetEra.com, there isn't a major third party out there Sony failed to approach asking what kind of deals they could work out. Some had content, some had games, and some had both. And it's not as though Microsoft wasn't willing to offer their proposals, they simply didn't want to pay the asking price, since Sony actually approached with pretty high numbers in the first place. And then he goes on to say something that I think is pretty interesting. PlayStation Advantage, branding, and console exclusive wording are both going to get used a lot in the following few years. Wow, okay. So let's dig deeper and really analyze this claim for what it is. First of all, I find it really cool how Sony is turning up the heat to level 11 and really firing off all cylinders here. Like, I mean it when I say they're not playing around, which for me specifically is extremely refreshing to hear, because I was actually fearful of the fact that Sony may grow stagnant and somewhat cocky after their massive success during this generation, but I'm happy to say that there's really nothing to worry about so far, and key words being so far, because as far as I know, anything can happen, and you'd be surprised how quickly things can shift and change in our world. But from what we've gotten a taste of and experienced so far, from both Sony and Microsoft regarding their next-gen consoles, I think it's safe to speculate at the moment that Sony might actually be on their way to winning this gen as well. Also, something that I find pretty interesting and kind of amusing at the same time was the fact that Microsoft, of all people, didn't want to pay the asking price. Like seriously guys, let this sink in. Microsoft doesn't want to pay the asking price. Despite them being a multi-trillion-dollar company that's literally making so much money, that I think the higher-ups more than likely have private swimming pools with water replaced as fat green bills. And Sony being the underdog in terms of finances, and keep in mind, when I say this, I'm not saying Sony's not well off because I can say with a lot of confidence that they are. It's just that compared to Microsoft, they might not exactly be loaded with an endless supply of money. But in spite of all this, Sony still decides to man up and go for an extremely aggressive approach and try to secure as many third-party deals that they can, which, at first, I gotta be honest, caught me off guard a bit when I had initially thought that Sony would try to ride the incredible momentum they have right now going into next gen from current gen, and basically let their brand recognition and iconic PlayStation branding by itself do most of the talking. But then I figured out that this is really just Sony's way of saying, hey, if you thought we were gonna grow lazy, just keep in mind that we don't have any plans of slowing down soon. So really, I'm excited more than anything right now, just thinking, if these are the type of strides that Sony's making before next gen has even began, I can only fantasize about how good next gen is really going to be when we finally get our hands on it come this holiday season. And more importantly, during the middle of the generation too. Which is something I want to touch on too, because traditionally console generation patterns have been pretty consistent with how they've, presented themselves. It's usually mediocre beginning, where there are basically, minimal exclusive game offerings, and third-party games are also pretty subpar as well. Then, as the generation progresses and we get deeper into consoles' life cycles, many studios start pumping out their secret sauce and giving us really good games that are definitely worth picking up and playing. And then, as the generation begins to wind down and things begin to pack up, which is usually at a time when developers have really honed in on their skills and know the consoles like the back of their hand, they give us absolute masterpieces which stay memorable for many years to come. like God of War for PS4 and The Last of Us for PS3. Now, of course, Xbox was kind of an interesting exception because I'd argue they did things in the complete opposite direction. I felt as though Microsoft were really invested in the debut of the Xbox One after being successful with 360, which is why the Xbox One was, in my opinion, a very solid console with some solid exclusives close to launch. You know, games like Sunset Overdrive, Forza, Quantum Break. But then, what I like to assume is when sales projections were not as good, as initially expected, Microsoft kind of backed away and slowly eased their foot off the gas pedal and eventually gave up on trying to make the Xbox One a huge success, let alone trying to compete with the PS4, which is how we eventually came to see Sony overtake Microsoft and soon exceed them so much in sales to where we're now ending off the generation with an even higher than a 2-to-1 ratio. Sony has more than doubled Microsoft in console sales, which is honestly laughable on Microsoft's part. And to see that Sony is essentially paving the way to repeat this gigantic success with the PS5 by going super hard early on is great news for PlayStation fans everywhere. Also, I'm going to actually try and play the devil's advocate here for a second. This whole idea of Sony trying to get as many exclusivity content and game deals really just seems like that Sony could care less about the outrage that a lot of people had about the whole Spider-Man exclusivity fiasco for Marvel's Avengers on PS4. You know, how they decided to lock Spider-Man as a playable character behind their version of the game. And honestly, I'm neutral on this entire subject, even though there are a lot of people at both extremes who are either very, very blind fanboys who would bow down and praise Sony for basically any move they make, or extremely angry individuals who are constantly screaming anti-consumer with their pitchforks in hand, swearing to never go within 10 feet of anything with Sony branding on it ever again. So really, in the end, I guess we can say that Sony is really trying to make sure that not only do existing PlayStation players, stay retained on their platform, which, in my opinion, they most likely will, but also make sure that as many new people as possible opt for the PS5 over the competition as well, by trying to offer all these other advantages in terms of content for multi-platform games that you otherwise won't get to experience on other platforms like Xbox or PC. And keep in mind, this is separate from the exclusive games that they're offering too, which, by this point, I'm pretty sure no one is questioning the sheer quality of. So yeah, all in all, it seems like Sony really is not messing around this generation, and I think PlayStation fans everywhere can sleep well knowing full well that Sony's got them covered. So guys, as always, if you enjoyed this video, please give it a like. It helps out more than you know. Comment down below on what your thoughts are on this whole situation with Sony trying to secure as many third-party deals as possible, and consider subscribing to my channel to stay up to date on all the latest gaming and tech-related news and discussions, and I hope to see you again on my channel real soon. Take it easy, guys.